I stared at the words on my phone for so long that the coffee next to me went cold without me noticing. It was a Tuesday night in early December. Outside, the street was already glowing with holiday decorations. My neighbor across the way had strung his lights the weekend after Thanksgiving, just like every year. I could see them blinking through the kitchen window. Red, green, white, over and over. My son had sent the message at 6:14 p.m. Dad, we talked it over and think it's best if you do Christmas on your own this year. We need space as a family. Jen and I have decided to spend the holidays with just our kids, our way. Hope you understand. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter, picked up my mug, realized the coffee was cold, and set it back down. 41 years I worked. 31 of those as a structural engineer, the last 10 as a senior consultant at a downtown firm that still used my name on proposals even after I'd handed most of the actual work to younger men. I built things, bridges, parking structures, things that hold weight. My son's name is Mark. He's 34. His wife's name is Jen. They have 2 kids, a boy named Leo, who's 7, and a girl named Mia, who just turned 5 in October. I know Mia's birthday because I ordered her cake. I know because I paid for the party venue. I know because for the past 4 years, I've been covering a large chunk of Mark and Jen's life. Let me be specific. I think specifics matter. When you're vague about money in a family, people fill in the gaps with whatever number makes them comfortable. So I was paying their mortgage, $2,900 a month, on a house technically in my name, because Mark's credit wasn't strong enough when they wanted to buy in 2021. I was covering both car payments, $600 and $520. Mark was still on my insurance, a leftover from when he lost his job during the pandemic that somehow never got fixed. I paid Leo's private school tuition, $400 a month, because Jen felt strongly about the public school in their district. I'd given Jen a backup credit card for household emergencies, which averaged $800 to $1,200 a month in charges. Added up, I did that Tuesday night after I microwaved my cold coffee and stood at the counter with a notepad and pen. Just over $7,500 a month, $90,000 a year, to be told I needed to find somewhere else to be for Christmas. I want to be honest about something. My first feeling wasn't anger. I know that might surprise people. My first feeling was closer to embarrassment. A deep, quiet embarrassment, like being the last to understand a joke everyone else had already moved past. Had Mark been hoping I'd remove myself? Had Jen? Had they already told their friends, her parents, that they'd finally set a boundary with the difficult father-in-law? I stood in my kitchen, in the blinking red, green, white light, and felt like a fool. My wife Marie passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to the end. We had 40 years together, and I won't pretend those 40 years were all smooth. We argued about money. We argued about Mark, especially in his 20s when he was drifting. But she loved that boy with a completeness I always admired, even when I thought she was too easy on him. After she was gone, I think I tried to love him the way she had. I opened my wallet and kept it open. I told myself it was for the grandchildren. I told myself Marie would have wanted this. Standing in that kitchen, I understood that I had been using generosity as a way to stay connected to a son I didn't actually know how to talk to. And he had let me. I picked up the phone, not to call Mark. I opened my banking app. The mortgage autopay was scheduled for the 15th, 9 days away. I looked at it for a moment. The bank name, the account number, the little green check mark saying it was active. I pressed the button to cancel the recurring payment. A small box appeared. Are you sure? I pressed confirm. Then the car payments, Mark's first, then Jen's, both cancelled. I moved to the insurance portal and started the process of removing Mark from my plan. It would take a few days, but I began it. I looked at the backup card. Jen had used it 3 days earlier. $340 at a home goods store, $67 at a restaurant. I called the number on the back of my card and reported it lost. They said they'd send a new one to my address. The old one would stop working within the hour. I did not cancel Leo's school tuition. I thought about it. I sat with that decision longer than any of the others. Leo hadn't sent me that message. Leo was 7 years old and had no vote in any of this. I left that payment alone. I poured my reheated coffee down the drain, made a fresh cup, and sat down at the kitchen table. I want to tell you I felt righteous, powerful. People in these situations are supposed to feel that clean snap of a decision made, the satisfaction of a door swinging shut. I didn't, not entirely. What I felt was tired and sad, and beneath those things, still, the same embarrassment as before, because I had let this go on for 4 years. I had written checks and transferred funds and smiled at holiday tables where I paid for the centerpiece, the turkey, the children's winter coats. I had let myself become an ATM with a grandfather's face. And I had done it willingly because the alternative, the direct conversation about what I needed, about what was owed in terms of simple human decency, felt too hard. Marie would have had that conversation years ago. She would have said her piece at the kitchen table, calm and clear, without a single raised voice. I had always been the one to avoid it. Well, here we were. I didn't respond to Mark's message that night. I went to bed early, slept better than I expected, and in the morning I called my attorney, a man named Paul, who'd handled my estate documents for 15 years. I told him I wanted to review my will and also discuss the house. He didn't ask many questions. Paul is a practical man. The house question was more straightforward than I'd thought. Since Mark's name wasn't on the mortgage or deed, something I'd done out of caution, not foresight, but caution that turned out to be foresight. I had options. I told Paul I wanted to send a formal notice that I was planning to sell the property and that they would need to find other housing. He drafted a letter. I signed it. It went out by certified mail on Thursday. Mark called me Friday morning at 7:52. I know the exact time because I was eating toast and watching the birds at the feeder in my backyard. I looked at my phone and thought, here we go. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to have that conversation standing at the counter with half a piece of toast in my hand. Some things deserve more than that. He called again at 8:15. Then Jen called at 8:47. Then Mark 3 times in a row, 9:03, 9:05, 9:07. Then a text. Dad, we got a letter from a lawyer. What is going on? Please call me. I finished my breakfast. I washed my plate. I put on my coat and took a walk around the neighborhood, something I do most mornings anyway. Doctor's orders, 45 minutes minimum. The Christmas lights were still on in most yards. Some of the inflatables had gone flat overnight from the cold, and there was a deflated Santa lying across someone's lawn like he'd had a very hard night. I understand that sounds a little comical. At the time, I barely registered it. When I got home, I had 14 missed calls. 7 from Mark, 4 from Jen, and 3 from Jen's mother, Linda, whom I had spoken to perhaps a dozen times in 4 years, and who apparently felt this was the moment to close that distance. I also had a voicemail from Mark's friend, a man named Dave, whom I'd met twice at barbecues, and who now felt sufficiently invested in my finances to call and tell me I was making a mistake. I sat down in my armchair and thought about what Marie used to say. She had a phrase for when people overstepped. Not an insult, just a quiet, firm observation. She would say, "You've wandered into a room that isn't yours." She said it pleasantly. It landed like a door closing. I called Mark back that afternoon. I waited until 2 o'clock when I knew Jen would be out picking up the kids from school because I wanted to talk to my son alone. He answered before the second ring. "Dad, what is happening? Why did we get a letter from Paul?" "Because I asked him to send it," I said. "Are you serious? You're selling the house? Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know, Mark. Where were you planning for me to go for Christmas?" A long silence. "That's not the same thing." "I know it's not the same thing," I said. "I'm not selling the house as punishment. I'm selling it because it's my house. And I've been carrying a mortgage on a home I don't live in so that you and Jen could have something you couldn't afford on your own. And the message you sent me Tuesday made very clear that you see me as something other than family. So I'm making some adjustments." He started talking about the kids, about Leo and Mia, about how they couldn't just be uprooted in the middle of a school year. I told him I understood. I told him I had not canceled Leo's tuition and had no intention of doing so mid-year. I told him that when it came to the children, I would always try to do right by them, because they were children, and this was not their doing. He got quiet when I said that. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said. "But I need you to understand that I have been supporting your household at a level that neither of you has ever acknowledged or expressed any gratitude for. And when you tell me I don't belong at a family holiday that I've been paying for, that there's some threshold I need to meet to earn a seat at a table in a house I own, then I think we're past the point where I should be keeping this arrangement going." He said, "Jen is going to lose her mind." "I imagine she already has," I said. More silence, then quietly. In a voice I hadn't heard from Mark in a long time, maybe not since he was a teenager and something had genuinely gotten through to him, he said, "I didn't really think about how that message sounded." "I know you didn't," I said. "I told him I would give them 60 days, more than the legal minimum, to figure out their housing situation. I told him I would be happy to help them understand their options, because I am in fact someone who knows a great deal about real estate and finance, if they'd ever like to use that resource. I told him I loved him, and I meant it. even saying it into the phone in my quiet living room to my son, who had just spent the last 24 hours flooding my voicemail. He didn't say he loved me back, not then. I didn't expect him to, and I was okay with that. The following week was genuinely unpleasant. Linda left me 2 more voicemails. A cousin of Jen's, someone named Kyle, whose existence I had not previously been made aware of, sent me a Facebook message calling me vindictive. I called Paul twice to make sure the paperwork was in order. I didn't sleep as well that week. Not badly, just lightly, the way you sleep when something unresolved is sitting in the back of the room. I kept my routines. Morning walk, breakfast, an hour of reading. I had been working through a biography of someone who spent decades building things for public use that he would never personally benefit from. I found that comforting in a way I didn't try to analyze too deeply. My neighbor across the street, a retired high school principal named George, noticed something was up. Not because I told him, I didn't, but because George is perceptive in the way that people who have spent decades managing teenagers become perceptive. He knocked on my door one evening with a casserole his wife had made. We sat in my kitchen and he didn't ask any questions. We just talked about the book I was reading and about whether the city was going to fix the pothole at the end of the block. It was one of the better evenings I had that month. 12 days after the initial message, Mark showed up at my door. No call ahead, just his car in the driveway at 10:30 on a Saturday morning, and then the doorbell. I had flour on my hands. I'd been making biscuits, another thing Marie had taught me, one of the few cooking skills I'd actually retained. I washed my hands and opened the door. He looked tired. He'd lost some weight in his face. Or maybe I was imagining it. He was wearing the jacket I'd given him for his birthday 2 years ago. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done my accounting with the notepad 2 weeks earlier. The biscuit dough was sitting in a bowl nearby. Neither of us mentioned it. He talked for a long time. He told me that Jen's parents had made a comment years ago, a passing remark at a dinner I hadn't been at, that I controlled Mark through money and that he'd never fully shaken it. He told me he'd let that idea sit in his head until it warped into something it wasn't. He told me Jen had her own history with a parent who used gifts as leverage, and that she'd brought that fear into their marriage, and that he'd let her because it was easier than examining it himself. He didn't say any of this well. He stumbled through it, repeated himself, and at one point pressed his hands flat on the table like he was trying to hold something steady. He's not good at this kind of thing. He never has been. Neither am I, to be fair. When he was done, I got up and put the biscuits in the oven. I poured us both coffee. I told him that I understood more than he probably expected me to. I told him that I had my own failures in this, that it had been easier to give money than to talk, and that I had let that become a pattern because it felt like love, even when it wasn't. I told him that what I needed from him, more than an apology, was a different kind of relationship going forward, one where he talked to me, where he told me what was actually going on with him, his work, his marriage, his life, instead of asking me to fund a version of it I wasn't allowed to be part of. He said, "I know, Dad. I need you to know it for longer than this morning," I said. He almost smiled. "Yeah." The biscuits burned slightly at the edges. No, we ate them anyway. I did not cancel the sale of the house. I want to be clear about that, because this is not a story where everything returns to how it was before. The house went on the market in January. Mark and Jen found a rental in February, smaller, in a different district. The process required hard conversations between them about income and priorities that, from what Mark told me later, they had never actually had. I helped them move. I rented a truck and drove it myself, which Mark protested and I ignored. Leo changed schools. I won't pretend that was easy. He had a hard couple of months, but Leo is a resilient kid, and by spring he had a best friend in the new place and had joined the soccer team. Mia, being 5, mostly just wanted to know if the new house had a yard. It does. The backup car did not come back. That chapter is closed. Mark and Jen are managing their finances independently now for the first time in their marriage. And while I know it's tighter than it was, I also think they're both slightly taller for it. That's the only way I know how to describe it. I spent Christmas that year at George's house, which I had not planned, and which turned out to be unexpectedly fine. His wife made a stunning rib roast. There were grandchildren running around who I did not know and who seemed to accept my presence with the easy grace that children have when they're somewhere warm and there's food involved. Mark called me on Christmas morning. We talked for 40 minutes. He told me about Leo's soccer and Mia's new obsession with drawing horses. And at the end he said, a little awkwardly, that he hoped I had a good day. "I'm going to," I said. It is a strange thing to rebuild a relationship with your own child in your 60s. There is no manual for it. You cannot go back and have the conversations you didn't have. You can only start having them now, imperfectly, at a kitchen table with slightly burnt biscuits, and see what grows. I think about Marie sometimes in those moments. What she would make of all this. I think she would give me a look. Not a disappointed look, but an amused one. The look she had when something took me longer to understand than it should have. "There you go," she'd say. "You finally figured it out." I hope she's right. I'm working on it. I've had a lot of time to sit with all of this. That's one of the things about getting older that nobody really prepares you for. You end up with a lot of quiet time. And in that quiet, you start to see things clearly that you spent decades looking at sideways. What I understand now that I didn't fully understand when I was standing in that kitchen with my cold coffee is that what happened with Mark wasn't just about a text message or a holiday dinner. It was the result of years of choices, his mine, both of ours. Cause and effect doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes it coils around slowly, and by the time you feel it, it's been tightening for years. I gave Mark money because it was easier than giving him my full attention. I told myself it was love. And it was, partly. But it was also avoidance. I wrote checks instead of having hard conversations. And in doing that, I taught him without a single word that my presence in his life was financial. That I could be managed. That I was in some fundamental way a resource to be used rather than a father to be respected. I didn't intend any of that. I doubt Mark consciously understood any of it either. But intention doesn't change the outcome. That's the part nobody wants to sit with. The moment I canceled those payments, I wasn't punishing him. I was stopping a pattern that I had helped create. That distinction matters to me. There's a difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge wants the other person to suffer. Consequence just lets reality arrive. I stepped out of the way and let reality arrive. What I've come to believe through all of this is that genuine strength, the kind that actually holds things together, isn't about never being hurt. It's about being honest about the hurt and then deciding deliberately what you do next. Mark didn't expect me to respond the way I did because he'd spent years watching me absorb things quietly. The moment I stopped absorbing and started acting, everything shifted. Not because I frightened him, but because I showed him, maybe for the first time, that I had a self-worth protecting. Leo adjusted. Mia found her yard. Mark and Jen are figuring it out. None of that would have happened if I'd swallowed that December message and kept signing the checks. I'm not holding this up as a model for anyone. Every family is its own particular tangle, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way that I'd undo if I could. But I do think there is something true in this. The people who love you, really love you, can handle your honesty. They might not like it at first. They might not call you back for a while. But the relationship that comes out the other side of that honesty is real, in a way the previous one wasn't. Mark and I talk now, not every week, but regularly. We talk about things other than money, which is new for us. He told me last spring that he'd started keeping a budget for the first time in his adult life. He said it with a kind of quiet pride that I recognized. It was the same pride I felt the first time I signed a contract as a junior engineer 40 years ago. The pride of a man who has done something on his own. I thought about Marie when he told me. I thought, there he is. That's the son she always believed was in there. I believe it too. I just needed to stop getting in his way.